Well, I know you've heard it a couple times already, but can I just say again, what an honor it is to be with our moms in the room, those of you tuning in online. When I say Happy Mother's Day this year, it just comes from a slightly deeper place for me personally, because of the fact that this year is the first Mother's Day for my best friend of the last 14 years. This is Emily right here and our little guy, Davis. And she said what she wanted for Mother's Day, her Mother's Day gift was for me to not blow up her face on a 20-foot screen. So I kind of cheated with that picture instead. So that's the back of my wife's head and my son. And it's just been that year, right? I mean, I've just seen the miracle of motherhood right in front of me, the number of things that I have either thought or said out loud. I could never do that. The list is very, very, very long. And I am so convinced that there's a space for so many of us, maybe not all of us, but for many of us in our head and our heart, for the unconditional love of God because of the way that moms love us. And in that same stretch, it also is one of the most complicated days of the year for Emily and I, because Mother's Day hasn't been the same since I met her 15 years ago, because Emily's mom passed away when she was 11 years old. We're missing her extra this year. And the years have been different. Some years are more celebratory. Some years come with a lot more grief and a lot more just memories of painful times. And so they're never quite the same. And I say that just to say, I think one of the beautiful things about church and society is that it's a place where you can come and you can come as you are with whatever it is that you're carrying today. Whether this is a celebratory day or if you're missing somebody today, if that relationship is more complicated than you ever dreamed that it would be, or you're in the longest season of your life praying to become one, just know that you can be here and there's space for you here. We're grateful that you're here. Emily's mom also designated 12 women, one for every month of the year, to play the role of mom in Emily's life. So in some ways, even though I haven't met my mother-in-law, I've met 12 of them. If you play that role in somebody's life, happy Mother's Day to you as well. And that also means this is the year that my mom became grandma, and we are so blessed to have her. I also would just note, I think it might be like the Eastern European Serbian blood in her, but we just let necks fend for themselves in the Geist household. I think holding their head, it's overrated. You know, how are you gonna grow up big and strong? So, but it's been that year for us. And I'm also grateful to be in this series, a series called Where Your Feet Are, being the day that we celebrate half of the parents around the world. Because we have gotten advice so much in the last year, don't miss this season. You'll never get these days back. If there's ever been a time I wanted to be present, it was as a new parent. And I also just feel like I have to admit up front that when I think about a series like this, I don't know that I've ever felt more inadequate to deliver a series. This is one of those where I need to be on the front row, taking notes, watching both services. I just told Jeremy that this week. He did such an incredible job with the first two parts, and I'm terrible at this. This has been my struggle of my faith journey over the course of my last 10 years. Everybody in my life, my closest friends, they know when I've just left the room. Does anybody else do this? Like you're mid-conversation and you're just on autopilot? Like my friends know all the cues. It got so bad in our early marriage that Emily, she asked, can I have a code word so that I'm not like passive aggressive, but I can just suggest when it might be like time to come back into the room? And she chose pancakes. I don't know why, there's no story behind that, but if she said or she texted me pancakes, it was just kind of a time to say, hey, you know, might want to hang with your family at the dinner table. And I'm like, okay. So clearly I've got issues, and I am just grateful to be a part of this because writing this series has been therapeutic for me. I was talking to Jeremy just on Monday this week because we meet on Mondays, and I was telling him last weekend was a long weekend for me because our little guy, he had been sleeping through the night for a few weeks, and then every hour on the hour, he just decided to throw a party in the nursery and invite mom and dad in. And I told him, as tough as it is to get out of bed, like that's not great a bunch of times. I think it's a lot harder because I live in a different time zone. It's like we can't do this forever. He can't be 30 years old and I get him out of bed to rock him at night. Like this isn't okay. And Jeremy's like, yes, I get there. And that's just the space and season that I'm in. And so now that I've sold myself as an authority on this topic, what I'd like to do is just summarize where we've been in the first couple of parts and then introduce to you where we're going today. Because we've been talking about this idea of the present, or existing, or occurring now. You could argue it is the only thing that is real. And each week, Jeremy's invited us into this exercise that I would like to do the same, which is one of those right stomp, left stomps, just to remind you that you're here. And so on the count of three, if we could just do that right where you are, sitting in your seat, 1, 2, 3, just a reminder that nothing outside of this room plays into this very moment. This is an opportunity to even practice in this space being present. Jeremy, in part one, his big idea was to put intention behind your attention. It's amazing to think about that we have so many similar intentions in the important parts of our lives, yet our stories go in so many different directions because we get distracted and there are so many paths that we take. So what does it look like to be intentional about where our time and our focus goes? That's one of the most helpful questions in part two. And he said, what time zone are you living in? That each of us struggle with the reality of pulling the past into the present or being afraid and anxious of the future. And this question just kind of grounds you to say, are you projecting something that hasn't happened yet? What time zone are you ultimately living in? And the verse that's been the guiding verse of the first couple of parts has been this in Hebrews. It's been the challenge to say, let us throw off everything, all the distractions that hinder and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes, giving our attention to, intentionally, on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And for those of us who are trying to follow Jesus, I think a follow-up question is just, why don't we just do that? Why don't we just give him our best time and attention? I think the answer is actually maybe very practical and simple. It's just, there are so many distractions. There are so many pulls and alternatives for our time that we give into on a daily basis. And so today, I might call today not really where your feet are part 3. I might actually say this is a little bit more like where your feet are part 2.5. I say that just because Jeremy, I mean, it's just amazing. You got to go watch it back. Just so profound, really helpful insights the first 2 weeks. Buck has a really powerful conclusion for us in part 4 next week. Today, it's a little bit more in this like practical, almost like TED Talk vibe more than a traditional sermon, because we felt like we couldn't do a series about being present and not talk about what is the number one attention grabber in every single one of our lives. And actually, for a lot of us, there is not a close second. Something has changed in most of our lifetimes, considering most of our kids and students are in their environments around the buildings. It means something has changed in our lifetime. And I'm actually not talking about COVID, but something that will be written about hundreds of years from now. Meaning our great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, they're gonna read in a history book, or they're maybe just gonna have this downloaded straight to a chip in their brain. I don't know how it'll work. They're gonna learn about some of the most important inventions in history, and they're gonna hear about the wheel and what that did for trade and transportation, the printing press and how that disseminated information and education, and the light bulb and what that did both for our productivity and our sleep habits. And they're gonna get to 2007. Does anybody know what happened around 2007? Yeah, Jordan's iPhone, right? No, the iPhone, the smartphone, and most major social media that still exists all around that same window. There was an article I came across this week that I loved because it's already 5 years old, so you can already see some of the things that are outdated, but he describes this change that most of us have lived through when he said, when I was running around in 2004, Facebook didn't even exist yet. Twitter was still a sound, and the cloud was still in the sky. He adds 4G, now 5G was a parking space. Applications were what you sent to college. LinkedIn was barely known, and most people thought it was a prison. Big data was a good name for a rap star. Skype, for most people, was a typographical error. And then all of these technologies blossomed around 2007. So today, I want to talk about not just the thing that pulls us out of the present moment that we carry on us 24/7 in our pocket. I actually want to talk even broader than that. I want to talk just in general about screen time. I want to talk about, yes, our phones, but our laptops, our iPads, our TVs, our gaming systems, our Apple Vision Pros for you early adopters, our Apple Watches, all of the things that pull our time and attention together because it's changed so fast, so rapidly. In fact, if we just had this conversation 10 years ago, only a third of us in the room would have actually had a smartphone at that time. The other 2/3 of us would have been trying to text under the chair on our 10-digit, Motorola Razr or something similar. Today, 97% of Americans have a smartphone. That gap has closed in just that 10-year window. The first text message was only sent in 1992. Today, you've sent multiple. perhaps since I started talking, right? We all contribute to the average. Maybe you know this, but the birth date of the internet is considered to be January 1st, 1983. Next time you're at a New Year's party, as soon as it hits midnight, instead of yelling Happy New Year, you can just yell Happy Birthday. Nobody will think you're weird or awkward at all. But you think about this time window. In that span, the entire digital universe, all of the data that's ever been uploaded, was 4.4 zettabytes. Don't worry about how big that is. Our minds can't understand it anyways. It's just a very big number. This is the history of everything digital that's ever been uploaded. And by 2020, it was 44, meaning we're in the exponential state. Every year is dramatically different than the year before. And then, in February 4th of 2004, there was one Facebook account, Mark Zuckerberg's. Today, there are 5 billion people on planet Earth that are on social media, and the average person uses 7 different platforms every single month. I can't think about something beyond maybe, I don't know, like food and water that would be adapted by the whole globe in that short of a time period in human history, yet now it's becoming the norm. But to have this conversation and be like, well, what's the tension with that and what do we do? It feels a little bit like trying to talk to a fish and say, here's what it'd be like to be out of water. Right? I mean, we just all exist with this all the time, all around us. All of our friends do it too. It's so normal. It's just kind of like, well, get with the times, I guess. It's hard to paint a picture of what we might have missed out on. There's this pretty powerful video. I wanted to show it. It's about 5 minutes long, but unfortunately it's on YouTube, so our live stream would get taken down for copyright issues. But it's this spoken word, kind of this poem that won an award, and it tells the story of this individual who met his wife. They have to live this long journey together, have multiple kids together, shows their whole story, and at this twist at the end of the video, it shows actually none of this ever happened. He was just on his phone. And it's trying to paint a picture of what are the moments, what are the relationships, what are the insights, maybe what is it that God is trying to impress in our heart and get our attention on a daily basis that we're just not attuned to because we're so out of the moment in this new digital world. But even that, how motivating is that to be like the person you might have known? I mean, that's just hard. So what I'd like to do is make it just a degree more personal. I want to share what is the average amount that the average American spends on their smartphone every year. And I'm curious if we were to just do like maybe an over-under. Maybe if you were to point this way if you think it's more than 5 hours a day, and point this way if you think it's less than 5. We'll just set that as the benchmark. Okay, I kind of set you up to fail. It's 4.5 hours on your smartphone every day. And that's just your phone, right? It's closer to 6 to 8 hours a day if you're in high school or you're a college student. But let's do this. Let's just combine them all real quick. Let's just do TV, gaming, iPad, laptop, work, all of that. If you were just to say the amount of hours every day you spend on personal digital technology, let's do 10 hours. If you went more than 10, less than 10, what would it be? Now you're confused. You're like, what game is he playing? The average is 13 hours and 5 minutes. The most recent study we have is 2022. Maybe it's gone up since then. I know we've shown a lot of numbers already, and we're not all numbers people, but just hang with me for one more of these, okay? That would mean if you live to be the age of the average American lifespan, which is a little over 75 years, you would be unconscious for a third of that. Don't try to argue if you're like, I don't sleep 8 hours a night, you slept half your childhood, you nap a lot as you get older, it all evens out, okay? You're unconscious for a third of that. That would mean that you would spend 41 years using digital technology if you were the average. Wake up, get on a screen, go to bed. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 41 years. Which means you have 9 hours left over for everything else. If that is off by a factor of 4, that average, and I'm gonna just spend a decade staring at screens, I still wanna take a hammer to all of my technology, right? If I'm anywhere close to the average, and some of us, that means we're over that average, this should cause tremendous pause for us. You could reword this slide and say a paraphrase of it is simply this: if your time is your life, we're just literally trying to save your life in this very simple, very practical conversation today. So what do we do with that? I mean, digital technology is not going anywhere. And is there anything in the Bible that we can actually utilize that's not taken way out of context and manipulated that actually speaks to this? I mean, it was written in a time period where there was no electricity, much less smartphones, wouldn't be for thousands of years. What is in there that might be helpful with this? I think there's actually something that hits the nail on the head with this conversation. And it's in the letter of 2 John, which is it's the second shortest document in our Bible. And John ends his letter this way. He says something profound. He says, I have much more to say to you, which I already want to pause and just say I love this because John wrote the Gospel of John, which is unique amongst the four Gospels. Then he wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and probably Revelation as well, which means he has written, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, some of the most important literature in human history, and maybe is the most read author of human history, specifically when you start thinking about John 3:16. So he said a lot. He said many, 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 many important things, and he still says, but I've got more. I have more to say to you. And I do not want to use paper and ink. I have much to say, but I don't want to use paper and ink or the technology of the day that is available to me. Because that's absolutely what this was. Written language and then a way to send it around was a huge advancement in technology, a huge advancement in the sharing of information and education and history and story and so on. He says, that's not what I want to utilize. Maybe a way to rephrase this when you think about what papyrus was in the ancient world, you can just say, hey, I have much more to communicate, but I do not want to use the fancy technology available to me that would be faster, more efficient, and shareable. Now, this is not a knock on technology, right? I'm not trying to go old school. I'm not trying to say technology is all bad and get rid of it all. Obviously, he used technology in profound ways to spread the very word of God. People have read John 3:16 and placed their trust in Jesus just reading that verse alone. There is a lot of good and a lot of powerful that comes with technology. However, he's saying there is more on the line that we may be missing. He says this, instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face. The original language wouldn't translate that well to English because it actually reads mouth to mouth. It's this kind of intimacy, this closeness. And it says, this is what I would prefer to do. This technology has its place, but I'd rather be with you in person. And he actually gives us a why. He says, specifically, so that our joy may be complete. That what's on the line is your happiness, your peace, your contentment, your openness to the most important relationships in your life, and your openness to what God is trying to do in your life. I love that he uses that word complete because it kind of sounds like there's a shadow side of all this technology. To say it's incomplete, that it has its uses. There are ways in which it's beneficial, but it was never meant to be foundational. It was only meant to be additive. Part of what really makes this verse jump out to me is that John, because he also wrote the Gospel of John, uses the same phrase when Jesus is talking in John 15. And I love this because John 15 is arguably about the end goal of the Christian faith. It is about this metaphor of the vine and the branches and the invitation by Jesus for us to remain in him, remain connected with him. And that's the end goal of faith, is to exist in a loving relationship with Jesus, to do life with him, to be attuned to him. That's the metaphor. And in that verse in John 15, he uses the exact same phrase. He says this, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain or abide in my love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Similar sentiment. That apparently there's something about the intimacy that Jesus that Jesus desires with us that mirrors this kind of intimacy that we can experience in face-to-face connection with others and in our most important relationship. That you could say, God has designed us for this. We are relational people, that there's something about being across from you face-to-face and getting to see not just what you say, but what you don't say. What happens in the silence? What happens in your facial expressions? What happens in the space of your energy and your tone and what you smile at, what you're angry at? There's something about that space that our body craves, that our souls were made for. And so the invitation today, the bottom line, big idea, the kind of application all in one, is an invitation to create a space for face to face. What would it look like in this world of digital technology that, of course, is not going anywhere? What does it look like to be intentional with our attention and decide where is it that we are going to be present with one another? And this is not just about some legalistic list of things to do or don't do, right? The heart of this is to be where our feet are. This is the number one thing that pulls us away, that distracts us from the things that we want to be intentional with. So both the most important people in our life and our Heavenly Father, what he's trying to impress on our hearts and what it is that he's trying to say to us. I think a natural question would be, why is it so hard? What is it about this thing that pulls our attention? I mean, you've probably at this point at least heard of the word dopamine and all the studies and the hit that makes us addicted of that, kind of the happy chemical every time we, click or swipe. But I want to ask why as a follow-up to that. Like, why doesn't the dictionary provide a hit of dopamine for us, right? I mean, what is it about these things? And I even think there was an allusion to it there in what John was saying. There's an incomplete shadow about the way of using this kind of distance technology of writing to one another, that it's a taste of what we desire, but not what we most desire. And so it keeps us on just long enough to wonder, man, that like, that follow, it hits that desire, that acceptance or approval that I so want, the recognition that I want. It makes me feel a little bit connected. There's a taste of intimacy. There's a taste of success. And it's just enough to keep me scrolling and wondering on the next slide or in the next post, is that going to be the thing I really want? And it keeps us distracted. Technology is meant to enhance, not replace communication. This is important because, like I said, I'm not an anti-technology person. I'm kind of a technology nerd. I'm wearing 2 screens on me. I'm teaching from 2 screens here today, and there's 2 in the back that yell at me not to go long, okay? I am about it. I'm about using it in the most helpful ways possible. But in so many ways in our life and culture, technology has replaced what is most important, not been additive to it. I love what Carey Nieuwhof, who's a pastor and thought leader in Canada, he says, technology isn't good or evil. It just reveals and amplifies what's already there. If this was a series on technology, I would really want to do a part on the good of technology. I'm not going old school and saying like it's the end of the world or anything like that. There are so many ways in which technology saves lives, right? In which technology connects us to one another, adds joy and fun to our life. It is fun. God is not anti-fun. Some of my favorite childhood memories are playing Mario Kart with the 4 of us in our family. And somehow it was always my mom's remote that was broken and not working. I don't know how that quite worked, but amazing memories like that growing up, right? There is so much good. From a faith perspective, there are ways that we can engage with the Bible that nobody before us has ever been able to do. There are ways that we can give immediately to causes around the world. So many ways to spread messages of hope and support at scales that we never could before. I mean, there are amazing elements. And you probably don't need me to expand on how it multiplies the bad, to dive into the mental health crisis of the next generation, to look at the divisiveness and the extremism that is spread online, to look at the nearly $100 billion porn industry now, to talk about all of the ways that we numb out and escape with it. I mean, you know that the list would be very, very long. So today, this isn't about a good or bad even. It's just talking about let's pay attention to how we use the resource. For me personally, my relationship with my personal technology, I started to get intentional with that about 5 years ago, because 5 years ago is when this book came out and I read it for the first time. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And it's actually not really a book about technology. It would be very relevant to the series about being present and being where our feet are. In it, he says some just insane things that you could try that people would never do, like intentionally choosing the longest line in a grocery store, or at a red light, or maybe most asinine, trying to just drive the speed limit. Clearly, he lives in Portland and not Texas. But he has all of these different suggestions that he kind of throws out there. And there's a small little section specific to technology. And that was the one that kind of got my attention the most. And he suggests, what if you made your smartphone a dumb phone? And I try to embark on this journey. And I have done that over the last several years, and I want to share practically some of the ways that I try that. But at the same time, I also want to say, that same year is when screen time came out on the iPhone. And I love that that exists in so many ways. One, there's just a great irony in Apple being like, here's an application to monitor using our devices. I just think that's crazy in and of itself. But it also tells you the truth, right? When you're like, I'm not the 4.5 hours a day, like I could never, I'm so much healthier. Well, maybe, but it just tells you what is. One time in our community group, we did that as an opener to start a discussion. We said, everybody get out your screen time and share how many hours a day. Everybody, myself included, we all started lying. We were just like, well, no, I mean, that's Google Maps and I have to use it for work. And, we all had these different kinds of excuses. But I remember getting it out. And I remember where I was in my kitchen, waiting on the counter. I remember getting the calculator app out. And this was a weirdly emotional moment for me. It was like a time stood still kind of thing. Because I was pretty close to that average of 4.5 hours a day. I was right in between 3 and 4 hours a day, which means that if you were to calculate like waking hours, I was spending 91 days a year on my phone. And then I realized in that same moment, I had had a smartphone for a decade up to that point already. Because I got a smartphone in high school. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it was an Android Galaxy S2, but then I became a Christian and got an iPhone. And so I was recognizing, man, I've had this for 10 years now, which if that was my average the whole time, I have spent 2.5 years of the last decade since I got this thing on my phone. And it's just my phone. Throw in my laptop, my iPad, throw in the TV. I mean, I probably spent more than half of my 20s looking at a screen. It was a time stood still kind of moment for me. And I want to try to provide it for you today if you're interested at all. And so what I would actually like to do, because 97% of us have a smartphone, if you have it with you, would you get it out? You're not gonna have to share anything with anybody around you, so just kind of hide your screen, it's totally fine. And if you have an iPhone in particular, would you navigate to the screen time section, which if you just go to your settings, it's one of the main options on there. If you don't know how to navigate that, find a millennial or a Gen Z around you. There's a lot of people up here that can help. I'm told that an Android has a similar option. It's called like digital wellness or something like that. And if you would just navigate to it, and if you would go look at your average, and I've put together a wonderful chart up here so that you don't have to do any of this math on your own. If you are in the top 1% of people, like you spend just under an hour a day on your phone, you are still gonna spend 6 months of the next year on your phone, but you're like in a really great spot with this. If you fall into the average of 4.5 hours, you'll spend 100 hours, or 100 days of every year on your phone. That's like get up, look at the screen, go to bed, get up, look at your screen, go to bed, 100 days, or about 3 years of every decade. And if you're the average high school or college student down there at 8, you're gonna spend 5 years of every decade just on your phone. If you haven't found it at this point, it is too late. Give me one of these so we can circle back and be on the same page. On the count of 3, let's do the left, right, stomp. 1, 2, 3. If in your head right now you're arguing and you're like, well, so much of that is Google Maps and the music I play in the background and work, I would just love if you would do this exercise with me. It's a repeat after me. Just say out loud, my name is Jordan and I am a digital addict, okay? Because that's what addicts do. We didn't even have this 10 years ago, and now we're getting defensive about how we use it. I mean, we just pay attention even to that tension. Here's how I'd like to try to end our time. I wanna share a couple of the things that I've tried to do and a couple of suggestions just garnered from our staff of things we might be able to try. I was convicted like just 2 weeks ago as I'm like already preparing for this message. I was hanging out with our little guy, with Davis. He was on the floor. I got a push notification from ESPN, which is one of the only push notifications I get. It shows you where my priorities are. And I went down a rabbit hole of reading about a guy who was a bench player on the Lakers and whether or not he was gonna be available because of his knee. And I went down this, and then I looked up, and Davis was smiling at me. And that was another one of the want to take a hammer to the phone kind of moments. Because reading about a guy on the Lakers' knee, and I'm not even a Lakers fan, is like, what in the world? And so these are the kind of moments I want to try to minimize as much as possible with some of these suggestions. One, yes, to connect relationally with one another, but also to pull us into this present moment and be attuned, be aware of God's presence on a daily basis and what it is that he's trying to say, what it is he's trying to press on your heart. So these are optional. I just want to be really clear. These are ideas. This is not to feel like shame or guilt or like you got to do all these to be a good Christian. This is not that at all. The idea is maybe just try one. If you felt any tension at all with today's conversation, maybe just try one and see if it's helpful to you. The first one that we have on the list is what we put in a minor category, kind of like rank them by how much of a sacrifice I thought they might be all the way around. And the minor one is to check screen time each week and try to beat the previous week. You can gamify it. You can give yourself, some kind of reward. You can compete with a friend maybe. This is just something really simple. If you want to get financially healthy, the best step you can take is to just budget, just to watch where your money is going. This is trying to budget your digital time and just see where is it going. A really minor step would be to unfollow any people or accounts that cause negative self-talk. If there are accounts that cause you to feel guilty, that cause you to feel like maybe a little shameful, like I don't know if it's good that I follow this content in light of my relationships with the person I'm trying to be. If there's an account that just causes you to feel jealous, triggered, distracted, like why give that time and energy? Just unfollow. I love this next one. I just think, I've tried it and it's so helpful. Go on a tech-free date, right? You could, for example, just go and even if you're single, like you can just go hang out with friends and have everybody put a phone in the middle of the table or something like that. But I think what's cool about this is the closest we've come to discovering how to time travel. You can go on a date and experience what it was like to date for the rest of human history. And it's pretty cool, like seriously. You'll feel awkward or anxious at first. You'll have to practice like how to actually do this. But if you got a babysitter, just take one, take your spouses, that kind of thing. But there are ways to do this. Just try, see if you enjoy it. On a more moderate level, you could try going on a social media fast and observe how you feel. You might be, that's kind of minor, but it depends. Are you gonna do it for a day or a week or 30 days? And then just see at the end of it. Sit with some of the FOMO you felt. Sit with some of the anxiety you felt. Notice all the times you get kind of phantom alerts or you pull your phone out and try to check it. And then see at the end of the 30 days, do you feel more peaceful? Did you feel more present where your feet are? Did you feel more present or have more time for God? Maybe you could, if you are in the category of people that spend 3.5 hours a day watching digital media on top of our phone time, you could try not watching more than one episode at a time. I say that's moderate because you'd be like, what else do I do with the time? Like that's a big step for a lot of us. Maybe in the moderate category would be to try to delete some of the greatest time sucks. This has been one that's just so helpful for me personally in turning my smartphone into a dumb phone. Just the way it works for me, if you're a gamer, I'm really not trying to shame you. Like if you're trying to do less of that, then maybe this is helpful. I can't do 5 minutes a day of games on my phone. It is hours or it is nothing. So I just have to delete it. Social media is the same way. I've taken social media off of my phone. I'm not off social media altogether. I use an iPad. I just find that I don't tend to carry this thing around in my pocket and check it more out of habit. I check it more intentionally that way. So maybe whatever are the big time sucks on your phone, you're just like, I don't want that to rob hours of my day. Maybe you delete it. Here's some ones that might be a little bit more in the disruptive category. It might be major to try putting your phone to bed, not in your bedroom. Choose a time, 7 p.m., 8 o'clock, something like that. You put it in airplane mode, you turn it off, put it on a charger, and leave it alone. Did you ever pause and wonder when we just started to give people permission into our bedrooms at any time of night? Like, why do people get to contact us any time of day? Let your employers, let your boss, let your coworkers know, like, hey, this time I'm just not available. I'm gonna be with the people that matter most. This, in terms of your mental health, to not be reading about end of the world, doomsday kind of things as you go to bed or can't sleep in the middle of the night, or being intentional about what it is that you look at first thing in the morning, not social media and how amazing this mom is down the street, but just like, oh my gosh, I can choose to be intentional with my intention. Maybe it's that time with God habit that Jeremy talked about in part 1. There is a compounding effect to that I think is really powerful. Maybe you have a friend set a password. This feels like, I would just do this for my kids. Maybe you lead by example this way too. You would never go buy something without at least kind of knowing what it's gonna cost, right? Especially the big purchases, cars, houses. So why do we not do that with our time? We don't think at all when I download this app or when I adopt a new social media platform that's trending and create a new account, we don't think at all how much time we're gonna go give to that. The idea of this is to make it difficult to give your time away unconsciously. I do think it'd be major to be in a category of get a dumb phone. I've shared that. I've taken off most push notifications, social media, games, different settings that are probably not helpful to go into. I've turned my phone into black and white. It's just like the dopamine thing. It's a little bit less. You don't necessarily have to do that, but dumb phone sales, they're on the rise. Flip phone sales are on the rise again because people are waking up to like, man, I don't know if I want to give so much of my life to this thing, and maybe that'd be a major change for you. There are a couple that we have in the mandatory category, and I just only wanted to put something in a mandatory category that felt like, man, Scripture would back this up. This isn't just one of our opinions. I would say it's mandatory, especially if you are a follower of Jesus. Don't write something through a screen that you would be unwilling to say face to face. Don't comment something. Don't leave a review. Don't blast half the American population on the other side of the political party on your social media channels. Because I see every day so many Christians give away so much influence unnecessarily through this device. We're fighting for something so much bigger to be a portrait of, to point people to Jesus. So let's just not add to that extremism, that divisiveness online. I would say it's mandatory not to pressure someone to compromise with the power available to you. This applies, I think, to dating relationships, I think to single people, to not pressure somebody with the anonymity that's available to you, not to ask for something, request something, or send something that you would be embarrassed if anybody else knew about. I would say this also applies if you kind of have a position of influence or power or authority. Don't ask people that work for you to betray their boundaries and their time with their families because of the power available to us. I think it's mandatory to have the most important conversations face to face. If you're dating, honor him, honor her with the important conversations. If it's your spouse, if it's your children, have a regular time. You decide what regular is for you. You decide that interval, but a regular time that you're intentional. You're having conversations below the surface, that the technology is put away with the people that matter most to you. And I would say it's mandatory. If you're losing the digital battle, to ask for help. If screen time would reflect, I'm addicted to social media. If you would say, yes, I have a spending habit, I have a pornography habit, I have a gaming habit that I can't kick, all of those are over $100 billion industries that are designed to crush you, and they will. But you plus a friend, you plus a mentor, you recognizing the power of God that is available to you, the freedom that is available into that, there is hope for every single one of us. All of this is not meant to be some legalistic list that you gotta go try and check it all. The heart for all of it is to bring us into a present moment, to be where our feet are, to participate with the people around us and to participate with God on a daily basis, to be open and attuned to what it is that he's trying to press on our hearts. We actually have all of those steps I just listed at npaustin.com/face-to-face. We put it in a PDF on there. If you wanna try some of them, you didn't like one, you wanna try another one, there's a second page on there that has a list of over 30 questions that you could try in some of those face-to-face moments. If you try to have a weekly touch point with your spouse, that man, we're putting the phones away, and then you have that anxiety of like, wait, what do we actually do or talk about now? There's questions, some of which you've heard at Northpoint before, questions like, what's it like on the other side of me? What conversations are you having with me in your head? What are you grateful for right now? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? What are you learning? What are your hopes and dreams? All kinds of questions. There's over 30 of them like that you could look on there as well. But again, all of these are just tools to create space, to bring us back to the present moment, to not give our lives away to this, and instead to be open to what it is that God has for us every day. I want to end with this closing illustration, and I want to say before I even put it on the screen, this is actually not a sports story, okay? So you don't even have to like sports. It's not the point of this. But in the last year, LeBron James, he broke the record to be the highest scoring NBA player of all time. And to attend this game when people thought you were gonna break it, you had to spend thousands of dollars for every seat. I think the highest was something like 80 grand or something like that to sit in the front row to be here. And 99% of the arena to capture the shot where LeBron broke a record that people thought nobody was ever gonna break, 99% are taking pictures that they could have downloaded from the internet afterwards when they spent thousands of dollars to be there, except for 86-year-old Phil Knight on the front row, and this went viral afterwards, the founder of Nike and former CEO of Nike. I have no idea if he's a good dude or not, but in this illustration, be Phil Knight in a world of fish that is just surrounded by and doesn't know how to separate from this? Doesn't this capture the picture of a generation? What would it look like for us? Where do you need to create a space for face-to-face? Wouldn't this be a gift to moms on Mother's Day today to lean into exactly this? What would it look like for you to decide and pick one of those? Because you recognize your joy is on the line, your peace, your connection with your most important relationships, and ultimately, your openness to what your Heavenly Father is trying to say to you. So let's do this. Let's be where our feet are collectively. Let's not miss the moments God has for us every day. And let's fight to create a space for face-to-face. Would you pray with me? Father, just acknowledge there's a lot of opinions in this conversation. Shared a lot of opinions today. God, we just want to hear from you. What are you pressing on our heart? Do you want us to increase our time? Do you want us to decrease our time? Manage it a little different? Do you want us to blow up every device we have? God, you just show us that. Because I think ultimately your heart is for our heart. I just think you want to spend time with us. I think you want us to know you, to remove the distractions that allow us to connect with you and sit in the love you have for us. God, and I believe that's actually the heart of every single one of us as well. I think that's what we all most want, whether or not we know it. So God, would you open our eyes a little bit? Give us the courage to take just one practical step to address this practical problem in our lives, to use technology in ways that honor you and honor others, and allow us to be where our feet are. God, we love you. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Happy Mother's Day once again. We're so grateful you've joined us, and we'll see you next week for part 4.